Let's consider this example. Let's have a river, and in this river there is a boat. And there are two boatmen. One is pulling it in this direction, and the other one is pulling it in this direction. And this angle is 45 degrees, and this is 37 degrees. And the force that this man exerts on the boat is 30 newtons, and the force the other man exerts is 40 newtons. What will be the total force acting on this boat? Well, the force being vectors, we have to add the forces vectorially, and the easiest way to add the forces vectorially would be to use the components. So let's say that the horizontal axis is the x-axis and the vertical axis is the y-axis. So let's say this is the A, this is B. The force that the man A exerts, it will have an x component, which will be given by 40 newtons multiplied by cosine of 45 degrees, or the x component will be 28.3 newtons. The y component, well, this is the force. We consider this triangle. This length is the x component, this length gives us the y component. The y component would be 40 newtons times sine of 45 degrees, which will be also 28.3 newtons. Now let's look at the force that the second man exerts. Again, we consider this is a 30. We consider such a right triangle over here. The x component of the second force will be 30 newtons. The x component has this length. This angle over here is 37 degrees, and that length we can obtain by multiplying the hypotenuse by the cosine. Cosine of 37 degrees. And the x component of this force will be 20 newtons. If we calculate the y component, it will be this length. So this length can be obtained by the hypotenuse by using the sine of this angle. So it will be 30 newtons multiplied by sine of 37 degrees. But note that the y component is pointing downward. It is pointing in the negative y direction. And hence the y component is minus that length, or minus 18.1 newtons. Now we know the components of both of these forces acting on the boat. We can calculate the x component of the resultant force. Well, the x component of the resultant force will be the sum of the x components of each one of those forces, 28.3 newtons plus 20 newtons, or 48.3 newtons. So this is the x component of the resultant force. The y component is similarly the sum of the y components of the forces that forming this resultant force, 28.3 newtons plus minus 18.1 newtons, or 10.2 newtons. So now we know the components of the resultant force vector. So it will have the y component will be small. The x component is 4 times the y component. So this will be our resultant force. To calculate this angle, we can just calculate the tangent of that angle. Tangent of theta will be this length, which is the y component of the resultant vector, which is 10.2 newtons, divided by this length. Well, this length is the x component of the resultant vector, which is 48.3 newtons. So the tangent of that angle is 0.195. Now the angle that has a tangent of 0.195 is theta is approximately 11 degrees. So the resultant force makes 11 degrees with the horizontal axis, which is the axis along the river. So this is 11 degrees.